Welcome to another Gamma Partner Artist feature interview. Today we speak with Zoe. Zoe speaks on her experience, the way in which she creates very physically and then it lasts forever on Bitcoin, the decay in her work, the poetry in that, naming artwork, and all about what she gets up to in her art studio. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Okay, so very excited to have Zoe with us today for another Partner Artist podcast. Really looking forward to diving into her story. We actually came across each other rather fortuitously, and now she's a Gamma Partner Artist and I've collected her work and she's super well collected. But enough from me, let's hear from Zoe. So Zoe, tell us about your story, how you got to this point, but you can go as far back as you like. Some artists have talked about how they got creative as a kid and then, you know, every detail up until now, but I'll leave that to you. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for the warm welcome and having me on today. Really pleased to be here. Yeah, I guess I'll go back a little way. Not too many boring points. I've always kind of done art. Like when I was at school, when I left school, of a night time, there'd always be kind of paints or drawing or something going on. Like kind of throughout those 10 years, 17 to 27, it was just kind of something I did. I guess I thought maybe I would pursue it in the future when you kind of get all your things together, then you go do your art. And I variously sold in cafes and worked with like homeware stores in Australia and sold cool work, met some really cool people. But I guess like in retrospect, it was probably always a hobby or like a choice to do the art. Looking back, there probably wasn't a whole lot of grit or a whole lot of intent in it. Yeah, and I'm only kind of looking at that probably in the past year or the past 18 months on that journey and how you get to where you are now, as I'm diving into some really deep stuff and some really cool stuff. Like I'm really happy with what I'm doing at the moment. And I guess what changed all of that was an event that happened to us 3 years ago where we lost our son. And that lots of things happened to lots of people, but that was the event that changed my outlook on time, on what you can do here and kind of pursuing other careers where you've got this idea that art could be something it didn't quite make sense to me. So at the time I was already a mum and that happened, and about a week after I spoke at his funeral, I just went to our garage and I just painted. Like every night I just painted in a way that I'd never painted before. Like it was kind of wild. And it was like when art hit for me, like the reason people do art, the connection, the conversations that come from it, and this kind of thing where time doesn't really exist. And that, it clicked. And at that same time, it was late 21. And then kind of in the December, I'd been told about NFTs, not a digital artist, like physical, didn't know if it was even a thing. And because of COVID here in New Zealand, I had the series that came from that. I really wanted to release it, more so just to probably communicate with people around me, like that I was doing something, and that I was kind of mildly okay in that whole event. So I released it like digitally online, like tokenized, and it was really cool. And then from then, you just kind of navigate this space, and here we are 3 years later on that train of thought, like still on that line, but in a place where I'm really happy with what I'm doing.
So thank you very much for sharing that. Sadly, we've been through very similar experiences. It's interesting that life like that and things that happen to us can be so impactful. Have you found that art you said you just went and created like you've never created before. I suppose it's been quite impactful in the direction that you've taken or the way in which you've continued to create. How does it always come out in your work? Do you find it a therapeutic process or is it painful or a mix?
I use it's definitely changed how I paint. Before I painted probably externally what I saw more beautiful things, you know, aesthetically. Now it's like, it is dumb, but like from within, like I just paint like just kind of what comes, subconscious, conscious. Some of it's therapeutical, some of it's quite hard and quite tense to do. Like I don't find it super therapeutical. But all of it is like an abstraction of all of those thoughts. You know, you can think about all of those really hard things in your life in an abstract way, and you can kind of take yourself out of the emotion out of it and kind of work through it. And then when you share it, other things come from that as well. And you can't do that if you don't have the art to share. You know, you can't simulate those conversations or mostly observe how I am in those conversations or see how someone else looks at it. Yeah, none of that can happen without art or poetry or writing, you know. Well, for me anyway. So art was, yeah, it was a kind of a communicator to find probably other people that, yeah, you kind of find that everyone struggles, but it's hard to breach those conversations, you know, in cafes or when you're crossing paths with people, whereas art just like pinpoints really quickly.
For sure. And it's interesting. I've heard some artists say that they create in order to, I suppose, be a catalyst to drive emotion in other people. Yours is very driven from within. How do you find putting yourself or your heart out there in the way that it seems that you do?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's quite abstract out there. Like, I guess if you listen to this now, you know probably what a lot of the things I'm talking about. But yeah, I've never wanted to say it in such a way that's like a sympathy thing or anything like that, because I think what's interesting about these situations that happen to people is what people do after the fact or how they work through it, not necessarily the thing that happened. You know, that thing that happened doesn't really need to be talked about, but it's like, what has that person gone and done after they've gone through all of that? You know, how are they sharing that experience in a way that, yeah, might elevate other people? Or I'm not sure. I still don't quite know what what the goal is in sharing things. It's kind of it's just really interesting at the moment. And yeah, it's such a work in progress.
I think work in progress is a great way to put it. I think that life is a work in progress and art really represents that. And on that note, I don't even mean necessarily in regards to, what's happened to you or what might drive people to create. How do you find just putting your art out in the public, putting it on X, I suppose posting a poem or posting your thoughts? Yeah. How do you feel doing that? Is it a challenge? Do you worry about what other people are going to think, or is it just part and parcel of what we have to do in this space?
Yeah, interesting you say. That was like one thing I wanted to work on this year, and that's one thing that I do with just those paintings that I do every day, is just getting better at sharing, for me, like all of the things. And when you share all of the things, it doesn't put so much emphasis on sharing the one big thing, that you really want people to like or see or whatever. But yeah, I'm getting better at sharing lots of different things at lots of different times, so I have a better relationship, with the algorithm or with the comments. Or yeah, I think I'm in a good space with that. It's cool when lots of people see it, but then like sometimes you post something and 2 people will see it, and then you'll go and have like a full DM with someone who saw it that's far more valuable, than 100 people that saw it. Or so yeah, I think it's important to strengthen that relationship that you do have with X or social media as an artist, how you do that as an individual. But for me, probably sharing those everyday paintings, like some of them are so shit, I'm like, I gotta share it, it's just, it feeds back to me, basically, kind of getting better at all this thing.
Totally. And I saw a great post the other day saying that an artist only actually needs one person to like that post, because that might be the person that buys the art. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. Yeah. What about the differences in regards to, like you said, you used to sell art in galleries or galleries or cafes or other ways, and now you're selling it digitally. Do you approach it in different ways? Are you still selling art physically as well?
No, not at the moment, not in the last couple of years. I've just fully focused on this because it's where my head's at. I actually packaged up a physical this morning and sent it off, and it's such a different experience. And I really enjoy the art that I'm doing that then goes on chain, that then goes digitally. So that's where my head's at. But long term, there's definitely the aspect of, getting back into physicals and getting these into working with galleries and things like that. I think both worlds have a place in the future. And with what I do, I have the ability to tap into both. So I can't see why I wouldn't do that. But at the moment, I'm still, I'm a mum and I've got little ones at home. So this works really well. This is like incredibly accessible. Really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, that accessibility is really key. And you have a global audience rather than a local audience. And like you said before, you've gotten into DMs with people. How have you found that whole experience of all of a sudden having people who can collect your work around the world and then explaining to, I suppose, other people that you sell digital art?
Yeah, I have. I talked to one of my girlfriends about it, and she's still a bit like, what do you mean you talk to your collectors? What do you mean you tell them about your process? Like, that's something that just doesn't really happen, in the traditional world. You don't really know who buys your work. It's just so different. Yeah. I like it because it makes me improve as a human and communication and reflection on what I'm doing. You can just get to talk to really fascinating people that you would never have, you never get to speak to if it wasn't for something called art. It's cool. So I think it's good. I think it should be embraced by people.
Totally. Well, you and I would never have crossed paths and got to this point if it wasn't for the space, which is definitely fascinating. And so tell me, you create, like you said, very hands-on, very physically, and then put it on chain on Bitcoin. You also sell art on ETH and, have been in NFTs prior to ordinals. I suppose, how has that adventure been for you? And I suppose you have to photograph your art. Tell us about what you do. How do you get started? And then how does it end up online?
Yeah, cool. So I work with paint and rose petals at the moment on Mirror. And those three things create quite an interesting conversation between each other. You've got paint that's essentially plastic that's suffocating. You've got a rose, alive, once alive, a body, and then reflection is always like reflecting the artist and what's happening there. And I, essentially kind of photograph what I'm doing as I'm doing it, and I'm kind of searching for a feeling or something that's happening inside. And sometimes I don't capture it, in the session, and sometimes I do. And when I do, it's really cool. And then I get it on the computer. I don't do a whole lot of post editing, just kind of sharpen up the colors. And then going onto Bitcoin, obviously thinking about that smaller file size, the amount of colors you've got going on, and are you still getting what you want across? And even on ETH and more so on Bitcoin, like a lot of my work is going from that physical feeling touch to digital, where you can't touch it, you can't feel it. And it's that, it's that loss of body, and it's that, but the soul is still there and is still with you every day. No one sees it, but it's there. And like, I find that whole process has a lot of metaphors into my life. So when it goes digitally on the blockchain, like crunched down to numbers, to pixels, it's the memory of, really, that you can share with people, and then that story continues when other people interact with it. So that's kind of the gist of what I do. But it gets really messy in the studio. There's like petals everywhere, decay, but it's good. Like, it stimulates so much in me. I don't know. I haven't worked out a process other than this that that gets so much going, which is really cool.
And it's interesting, and you use the word decay, and I'm not sure if it was something that you'd thought about or if it was words that I put in your mouth. The fact that your art decays physically, it doesn't last. You can tell us more about that, because I suppose you'd see that in the physical world, and then it decays in the real world, but then it's preserved digitally on Bitcoin because it's a way to make work permanent. So giving that, I suppose, a juxtaposition between art in the physical world, which, you know, art in a gallery can burn down, for example, or, you know, or art might not last, such as the work that you create, but then it lasts online. How has that impacted the way in which you think about it now that you're putting your work on Bitcoin?
The biggest change that has happened with my physical work going digital, even before I got to Bitcoin, was the size of it. Like, you can't capture a work this big. This is, you know, like 1.5 by 1.5. You can't. Well, I can't capture it, you know, to that beauty. So they're a lot smaller. They're more like an A4 size, you know, physically. So that's the biggest change that I've had to think about over the last 3 years, on how do I get what I'm doing, and taking into account that it is going digital, and how much can I get across. Because I think, like, every physical artist will be like, you know, they'll photograph their painting, they'll put it online, you know, and sell it as a digital, but they'll always know, and most people will always know, that the physical it's better experience as far as I'm concerned. I just think it is, like, it's a different experience. So I was thinking about that, and then I took this idea further of taking that loss, actually working with it, and the digital it's the end result, like, it's the goal, it's where it should be, as opposed to being physical and then it kind of goes digital. Like, the intent is digital.
Yeah, it's such a different way of thinking about it, one in which I'm sure not many artists do. And then, to me, it speaks a lot to me because, like you said, it doesn't last in the physical world. You're using flowers which do experience decay. There is that degradation of the physical piece. What do you do with it afterwards? How long does it last in your studio?
No, not long, not long at all. Like, like, that day it'll all be like kind of scraped off. Sometimes it'll sit on my mirror, and you'll watch the petals that do still see the light, you know, turn brown, and it's all this whole thing that I watch kind of quite poetically. But no, they essentially don't last much longer than once they're inscribed, really. So it's quite a quick process, and you've got time is like something that plays into it as well, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, people can, I suppose it can, like I said before, that phrase that I heard listening to a podcast where they said that the art is a real catalyst for emotion. Everyone experiences it differently. Looking at some of the art that you've put onto Bitcoin, you know, we can see a cohesion across it, I suppose, but each piece is vastly different in itself. And then there's a conversation with light, where you really use light to create an effect. But yeah, tell us, you don't have to walk through each piece individually. You can if you want, but tell us about these pieces and, you know, perhaps the thought processes and whatnot.
All of these pieces, the first one there, 241, was actually an everyday painting that was requested, so that one's slightly different, but it actually fits quite nicely. But those other four, a lot of those works are talking about polarity, the extremities of thought, and whether that be physical or whether that be thought in your mind. And I think that's quite an interesting thing. I guess it's that yin and yang thing that is in everyday life, and if you can't have the good without the bad, and the dark and the light, and all of those things. So that's always quite riddled through my work, because I wouldn't be the person I am today without the darkness that I endured. So that's like an underlining thing as well. But they're all quite individual. They do speak to each other. Really pleased with them. I'm not sure what else to talk about them unless I go individual, so I probably won't.
That's okay. Well, it's interesting. I think that you've kept like you said before, the constraints and the challenges of getting your work onto Bitcoin. I think that you've been able to maintain quite a high definition, high resolution quality piece. How is that challenge for you, and how are you embracing it and learning as you go?
Yeah, learning lots with that. Obviously, like a limited color palette helps, not incorporating too many colors in. And then playing around with that file size at the moment. Yeah, really good to get some high res ones on there, which has been really cool. But yeah, I think you've got to really think about what is the message that you want to get across, and does your work still, portray that within the pixelated, within the look. So like a conversation with light was, is it a good example of that? I've still got quite a lot of the energy in there. And it speaks to, are you staying or are you going kind of thing. So yeah, you have to think about a few things, but I just play around. Some never make it, lots never make it, but these ones have, and I'm really pleased with it.
Yeah, on that note, how do you decide?
The feeling that I had while I was doing the work, that I can see it when it's digital, at the end result, that I can still get that feeling. It's been translated from here to there is the kind of ticker, I guess.
So it really is, I suppose, what felt authentic to you and something that you're happy to put out to the world? Yeah.
And like when I view polarity, that captured that studio session, that captured what was happening, on the mirror that day. Same with Unruly, that was really cool that day. But some of them, like I'll have the feeling and I'll be working things around and I'll get muddy, or I'll miss the moment, or I won't be able to capture it. So there's like nothing to show anyone else. Like I don't have a conversation to pass on to someone else. So I missed it. So I guess ideally I should be getting better, and I should be able to capture every session, but I don't.
I think that is probably something that everyone experiences in their life, art or otherwise. So there's definitely no should have. Tell me, we're looking at these names, Unruly, Dust Once Silk, Polarity. Do you put a lot of thought into the name? Do you want it to influence the piece? Do you want the potential collector to have, to view the name and for it to perhaps impact the way in which they perceive the piece?
Yeah, that is one thing that happens in ordinals and NFTs, is the name it's a big part of it. Unlike a painting in the traditional world, once you buy it, you don't necessarily go and stick a next to it in your house to tell everyone that this is the name of it. So it does become a huge part of the work, and especially abstract work. It's the only path that you give someone immediately, to get them into the painting. So yeah, some are more vague, but some are, I do think about the name a lot, and sometimes the name takes longer than the piece. Sometimes the name comes first. I'm currently working on a larger series that may come into fruition, and the names, I'm stuck on the names at the moment, on how much do I want to say within the names, or do I want to leave it a little bit more up to the viewer, But names are fun. They are cool.
Definitely. And then in regards to leaving it up to the viewer, do you like to direct them in terms of their thinking with the name and the description, or or even perhaps explaining what a piece is about, or do you prefer them to come to their own conclusions and their own feelings?
I used to write heavier descriptions, and I used to want to control that, control it a lot more, control the viewer. I really wanted to project what I wanted to say, but now I think I'm a little bit more subtle in that. I'm a little bit more okay with what anyone wants to think about it. That I understand that as soon as you put something out there, it's totally outside of your control. So there's enough of a way in, there's enough of me there if you want to get talking about it. dust once silk. It's quite literally like ashes that were once a beautiful body, is how I see it. But people may not see that, but it's there if you do see it. So yeah, I guess there's little drops along the way if you want to, but I think I'm getting better at understanding that you control your art here, but once you put it out there, it's, yeah, that's where it becomes fun, and that's where it becomes quite vulnerable and kind of out of control, and embracing that and accepting that. And you learn more things from people when you allow them to take control of your art, and you allow them to open up and talk about it and how they took it on. And if you put all of yourself into it, all of yourself into the description, then they don't really have a chance. You know, they can't really see themselves in here at all. So it's nice to leave some space.
Definitely. It's funny that you brought up Dust Once Silk, because as you know, I own it and bought it for my wife, given we have similar stories. And it's sort of like kind of haunting and piercingly beautiful. And you said, yeah, when you put art out to the world, it is a vulnerable experience. How is that when you know that some people are going to experience like quite perhaps strong emotion from what you create?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Sometimes I do think about it. Mostly I can't take responsibility for how someone's going to view an artwork. And in some ways, that's almost successful, that you can get that out of someone. Yeah, it's a fine line. I do think about it. But yeah, I don't take responsibility for how anyone takes my art. That's on them. But if it's evoked something, I hope that I've created a safe place in who I am. If something needed to be talked about or conversed over, but yeah, it's definitely, this is what art is, isn't it? When you're kind of walking on the fine line with other people.
100%, 100%. It wasn't meant to be an easy question. And then these two pieces, the other ones have had editions. Some of them have had editions made of them as well. These two have been part of releases as Gamma Prints, and Dance on Darkness sold out in a day, which, hats off. That was, and the other one sold out as well, but super successful. You're obviously starting to make more of a name for yourself. How does that feel?
Yeah, that was kind of wild, very unexpected. Like these things usually take, like 2 or 3 weeks to a month to sell. Like I kind of go quite slowly about things. Very, very happy with what's happening. But yeah, that was wild. I said to my partner, I was like, shit, that was kind of wild. Like lots of new people. You don't know who's seeing your work. Like, but it doesn't really, stoked, but like also doesn't change anything. Still lots of work that I want to do. Cool, and keep going.
No, I agree. And I appreciate that you're humble about it. I think it's just a nice pat on the back. I suppose I was more curious around, how do you feel as a creator when I suppose, a quick sellout or not, but when people buy your work, when they connect with it?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I often wonder like why they buy it, like what about it did they like, kind of thing. But I try not to ask too many questions. It is feedback for sure. I think it's feedback that I'm getting closer to what I want to be doing, and I'm getting better at communicating what I am doing. So that's all really good. Yeah, it's a good feeling for sure.
And one thing which I've noticed, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, in Dance on Darkness and then the pieces that we looked at before, they all have like a blackness or a darkness through them in terms of color choice. And then River Run still is, I don't know, it just seems a different piece. It's like color wise, there's not the darkness through it. Was that like, feel free to dive into that a little bit more. Was there something different behind that one and the way in which you then, the final product?
No, oh, like it's still the same process. That's just what came that day. But in the description, it goes from, you know, the racing heart to a symphony. So it's that change from this to that, and the image is quite calming compared to the others for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where you can kind of get into like over curation if that wasn't there. But that was one that went from mirror through to digital really beautifully and really, really cleanly. And that one probably reflects kind of how I am in everyday life, probably more than the others. The others are probably, yeah, something a lot of people don't see in me. But yeah, no, it's all part of it.
Yeah, I suppose then that really reflects polarity defined, doesn't it? It just seemed a break, or not a break, it seemed just like a slight difference, and I was curious to ask about it. And so tell me, on another note, you know, for people who might not be aware of accents, you have a Kiwi accent, you're based in New Zealand. Does living in New Zealand, or does that, you know, growing up in New Zealand, has that impacted or affected the way in which you create? Is there anything there?
I would say no. I'm not super worldly. I've been to the UK. I lived in Australia for 8 years, so again, not very worldly. I haven't really crossed a whole lot of cultures. I don't think it's impacted my work that much. Like, obviously I'm close to nature, but I don't necessarily use New Zealand things at all in my work. No. Yes, of course, like it's my environment, but on a whole, no, I don't think so. It just, the time zones always are a little bit tricky. I'm always GMing when everyone's GMing, and it's like, yeah, sometimes I wish I lived in like America when everyone's awake when I'm asleep. But no, other than that, it's just, yeah, it's a cool place to live. Super grateful to live here.
Totally. No, the reason I asked was, yes, like you said, I noticed some of your posts on X. I call it X, but in my head it's Twitter. You know, of like farmland or hikes or walks and things that you've been on. So there's that connection to the land, which is the vibe that I got in New Zealand. And you use flowers. Are they flowers that you grow? Do you purchase them? Yeah, where are your materials from?
Yeah, these are all they're all roses. There was a couple from my mum's garden. Actually, Dust Once Silk was from my mum's garden. Other than that, no, I purchase them. I often go to florists and ask for their seconds roses, and they sit in the studio for a couple of weeks until they're ready to go. Sometimes they're, yeah, crisp and new and beautiful, and sometimes they've depleted and they can't handle the paint as well, and that's really interesting kind of conversations that go on there. So I've learned a lot about, yeah, the flower that forms and then decays, and it happens over about a month. But no, I just use local florists. I'd love to say that I do grow them, but I don't.
I have some roses out in the garden, but I haven't suffocated them in paint. Maybe I'll just let...
I suggest not. Oh my gosh, it's so messy and like, yeah, kind of silly, but yeah, it does good things for me.
Is it a hands-on experience? You've posted photos of your hands covered in paint?
Yeah, like literally, and like door handles and all my clothes get paint on them, and I think that's good though. Like you're kind of surrendering to what you're doing. Like you're kind of losing control, and yeah, lots of things don't matter in those moments.
Absolutely. And you said you've got, you know, your child and your partner. Are they involved in the artistic process? Do you show them what you're up to, or is it just Zoe in her studio having alone time?
Yeah, I show them, like, not so much the little girls because they get their hands in all the paint and stuff like that, but they see it. Like my 4-year-old, she tells her kindy kids that I'm an artist, and that's kind of quite a proud moment. But yeah, I share quite a big room with my partner, so he's often banging around the computer and I'm kind of moving flowers around. So yeah, they're a part of it, but yeah, it is definitely it's a me time thing. It's about the only thing that is me, you know.
Yeah, I can relate to that, particularly when you're a parent. There's not a lot of that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so that, like you said, you know, she says mummy's an artist, which you obviously are. Do you foster that in her? Have you seen, you know, a willingness or sort of a curiosity about creativity?
I'm not sure yet. I don't know if I've got anyone else to compare it to, you know, any other kids, or if she's old enough to know. But like we do art and we do paintings and stuff, and she does paintings for her grandparents and that kind of stuff. So it's all in there, but I don't know if it's in there more than it would be for any other kid, you know. But we'll see. We'll see how that comes out. My partner's he's, you know, coding computer, so we're quite opposite. So it'll be interesting to see where the kids take their way.
Well, there's definitely an art in coding, because it's funny, the space in which we both work, you know, you as an artist and myself at Gamma, there's all of the pieces of the puzzle, and the coders are definitely a part of that to provide the actual platform. So it's, yeah, that's an interesting confluence as well. I meant to ask a bit earlier and I didn't. Were you creative at that younger age? Do you remember being a kid, perhaps in primary school? You like how did you get to wanting to create art or to be an artist as a profession?
I remember Mum would set up like a, you know, a desk for me to do my art, that I'd like paint penguins, or, you know, paint out of a book and try and copy something, and like do big canvases, and she would get them framed and like kind of be the proud mum. I guess that happened in intermediate. I remember doing that, early high school. My grandmother was a painter. She, like, quite a prolific painter, fantastic, which I don't know if things are, you know, bloodline does kind of have an influence on what you do, but that's definitely there. I guess mum looked up to her a lot. Sorry, my great grandmother, so mum's grandmum. Yeah, mum looked up to her a lot. So I guess maybe if she saw it in me, she kind of fostered that a little bit, or, you know, always supportive of what I was doing. It was just something that I did. It wasn't major, but it was just something that was always there. But only lately, in the last kind of 3 years, have I ever been like, you know, there's no choice. This is just it, you know, which is quite different to what it was.
For sure. And you mentioned before that you are working on something. You don't have to dive into it too much, but what can we expect moving forward?
I know, I'd love to say more, but I guess it's one of those things until it's all done, you know, do I want to talk about it? But yeah, I hope there's something coming, like a bigger collection for me, not for a lot of people, but for me it's a bigger collection. But yeah, it's roses and it's paint, but that's all I'll probably say at the moment, just because it's, you know, still only halfway.
Totally. Yeah, and it's interesting you say a bigger collection for you. Every experience is so unique to the artist. And so you've just sold a piece as a one of one, you know, on its own, an original, and then you've also released prints, which are editions on chain. Yeah, and you've kept your edition runs quite small, like, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, around that size. How have you gone with the sort of, I suppose, let's call it the business side of, like, what do you want to put out there, what supply and things like that? How's that decision making for you?
Well, the decision making around those kind of low print sizes was like, when I first inscribed, I didn't really know anyone in Bitcoin. I was just like, I really want to get something on Bitcoin. I don't know how, and I don't even know the sales point of it. I just want something on there to tell my kid. She'll be like, what were you doing banging around on Bitcoin, like, you know, way back then? So that was really exciting. I remember like watching it being inscribed, and then I was like, yeah, right. You know, let's see if we can sell something. So I was like, if I sold these 5 prints, then I'd be able to get another one on. So that would, you know, be able to turn it over. And then you've still got the original. So, you know, if someone wants to reach out and purchase that, then that's probably where you can, I guess, make money to invest more money. But if I can sell my prints, then I can, you know, put another one on. So that was the kind of thesis around the small print sizes. And I'll probably keep print sizes at that. Like, that's nice for me. It's also like what I can take on. Like, selling 50 prints is huge. You know, I probably don't have that reach, and I don't need that. You know, I'm good to sell 8. That's like really cool. But this, like, I've only ever released a collection size of 9, I think is the most I've ever done. But this one, yeah, is kind of 3 times that. And I don't know what that looks like yet on release, or how I go about that. But in terms of, like, I guess, business plan on releases, I don't have a structure of what the next year will look like. It's more so the art comes, how do I fit that into what I've already done? You know, how do I, yeah, respect my collectors and also think about looking at new ones? But yeah, it's definitely a juggle that some people are much better at than others. But yeah, the print sizes was, yeah, I just want to keep going on Bitcoin. So, and I think it's cool for the collector to have a 1 of 8 or something.
Completely. No, I think that there's an elegance in that, and like you said, it's cool for the collector. It's manageable, it's productive, and like you said, at the heart of it, you just want to put your beautiful art onto Bitcoin. So I love that. Zoe, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, it's been a pleasure sort of being part of your experience thus far and moving forward, and being a collector as well. So thank you for being a Gamma Partner artist. And yeah, thank you for the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. I have huge respect for you guys at Gamma. You guys work so well with artists, with the community. Onboarding people like me to Bitcoin is probably quite successful to get me over there. But yeah, always an advocate for what you guys are doing. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.